and give it to them, they will believe that you are seriously honoring them with this gift. So that's what I did. And then they gave it to somebody, and then they gave it to somebody. It's supposed to be a delicacy, but nobody wanted to eat it. We had pastors from about 8 of the Lutheran churches. The largest of those churches is called the HKBP, Kuria Christen Batak Protestant. That's Church Christian Batak Protestant. As you see, 3,000 congregations, about half as many as in the Missouri Synod, but 3,500,000 members, not twice as many as we have, but quite a few more, and their congregations are spread all over. What are some of the challenges to the Christian churches in Indonesia? The rise of Islamic fundamentalism. I don't know how much you know about Indonesia, but there have been terrorist attacks in recent years in the area of Jakarta. There are some rabid, radical fundamentalist Muslims in northwest Sumatra, a couple of 100 miles from where we were. But they really don't come into the area we were very much. Also the charismatic movement, or what sometimes is called the neo-Pentecostalist movement. Most of you are acquainted with that. We're talking about, Oral Roberts stuff, people speaking in tongues, having visions, doing healings, and so on. This is a problem all over the world. There's a terrible problem in South America, terrible problem in Africa, and terrible problem in Indonesia. And they recognize this as a serious challenge to a proper understanding of the Christian faith. Those of you who heard my sermon this morning, you're not going to get the crown without the cross. Sorry. According to the Pentecostalist movement or the charismatic movement, you can have the crown without the cross. If your faith is strong enough, your illnesses will be healed, you'll speak in tongues, miracles will happen, you won't suffer, your life will go great. This is the message preached all over the world by the charismatic movement. Very destructive of true Christianity. Child and women trafficking is a problem, also HIV/AIDS. What time does this class end? Quarter after?
Quarter after.
Here you see, we took a walk one day. Here you see the kind of homes that were pretty common in the area. I don't know how well you can see that slide, but probably well enough to see that that's not a mansion. It's basically a house with a bunch of boards tacked up there to keep it in place. They're poor people, but notice what sits behind the house. Not one of the newer models, but I guess it probably works. Now, this is typical Indonesian architecture. I should say typical Batak architecture. The Batak is the major ethnic tribe in this area of Indonesia. In this particular area of Indonesia, where this picture is taken, 90% of the people call themselves Lutheran. So, very high concentration of Lutherans, but like I said, they don't know their Lutheran doctrine very well. This house, as you can see, is very, very poor domicile, but once again, you've got your satellite dish there. Here's another home, another example of typical Batak architecture. Now, this was something very, very interesting. 88% Muslim, and everywhere you went, you could see stores that sold the spires for mosques. So if you need a spire for your mosque, you go to this store. I called them mosque tops, and I called the places that sold them mosque top shops. And they are everywhere, believe me. There is no embarrassment about confessing your faith as your religious beliefs as a Muslim. In fact, when we drove to Samosir, which is the name of the island we met on, frequently there would be women and men out in the middle of the road with collection boxes, collecting money to build the local mosques, which are basically just houses of prayer. When they get their mosque built, they go here and they buy a mosque top. Yes?
What does your government recognize as their official religion there, I guess?
Theoretically, there is freedom of religion. In reality, Christians are persecuted. But generally they are not killed. Generally the persecution would be in the form of financial punishment or the withholding of certain privileges, things like that. It's not as bad as in India, in my opinion. Pastor Briel, I'm sure, has talked to you a bit about India. This is simply the final slide, once again, to show you what a beautiful country it is. Just a gorgeous country, but a country with a lot of challenges, and a country that needs the pure gospel desperately. Now, I did want to leave a few minutes for questions. We got about 5 minutes left. If you don't ask questions, I'll just go on. But if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Do you teach in German over there?
No,
is it
only,
English?
see, these pastors that I talked to, they had been studying in Germany for PhDs. So your normal pastor there does not speak German.
What language? English?
They speak Batak.
Batak.
All of the men that I taught speak Batak. So, and then some speak, they don't all speak English. Some of them speak English, but not well enough, so we had to have a translator. So that slows it down. Yes?
Are there a lot of different languages in Indonesia?
There are.
Is Batak one of the
What was the
bigger
question?
ones?
Are there a lot of languages in Indonesia? Batak is the language of that area of North Sumatra. And it's a language that, all of the pastors who were invited spoke Batak, and only Batak as their native tongue. But there are a lot of languages. I don't really know how many.
Well, have you been involved in translating any theological works?
Oh, thank you for
there?
asking that. Do you remember that first photo I showed you of me and Mangisi and Bonar? Mangisi was the man sitting right next to me. He has translated the Book of Concord into Indonesian, which is a different language than Batak. But most of them can read Indonesian. It's not their native tongue, but they can read Indonesian. But he himself recognizes it's not a good translation. He was forced to publish it before he wanted to. He wasn't finished working on it and was rushed to publication. So he wants to redo it in a much better form so that everyone will have the entire Book of Concord in Indonesian. And then they need to find out a way to finance the distribution of it to all of the pastors.
Because you said that they obviously don't have enough theological training, so I was just wondering, do they have Lutheran theological works available to them?
They'll have the catechism. That's about it. And the Book of Concord now will be available, but they'll have to find money to get it to the pastors. Most of them have never read a Book of Concord. So they call themselves Lutheran pastors, but they've never read the Book of Concord. When I was in Africa this last time, we handed out 8 books of Concord to pastors, African pastors. They had never seen one before. So they've been ordained, but their theological training, as far as Lutheran doctrine goes, is very minimal. Yes?
What's the risk as far as being a Christian, in particular being a pastor or a teacher, Christian teacher there? Is it like India, like Pastor Briel was saying, that you
I don't think it's as bad as India.
Okay.
There is some persecution of Christians, and sometimes Christians have been killed. But normally, the churches are left alone, and the people have a fair amount of freedom to worship. I went to one worship service in Medan that had as many people in it as you will this morning in both of your services. 5 choirs, very well attended, and yeah, they have freedom of religion, for the most part. Do I have to stop?
I think we might want to wind down. I did want to make a couple comments. First of all, Pastor Preuss will be here at 2 o'clock this afternoon to talk about Uganda, which is a whole different ballgame. So I hope that you might take some time this afternoon to come back. This will be a completely different presentation. Second thing, you've heard me go through India, Indonesia, this afternoon Uganda. The needs of mission work are continue to increase throughout the world. Congregations like this one here have been blessed marvelously by God with not only good doctrine, but financial resources. How can we sit here on top of this and not feel a burning need to share what God has given us so that this kind of work can go on?